I'm not a religious person. I would say I'm not very religious. I'm like the black sheep of the family. I never went to Catholic school, unlike everybody else in my family. So they're like, what is up with your values? And I'm like, what do you mean?
Right.
While you're painting a bunch of dead things.
Yeah, exactly. That really freaks me. Like, that's not
I'm
something
sure.
that my dad's like super
So
happy about,
yeah.
because like this happened like right after my mom died, and he's like, show me your paintings, and I'm like, skull,
Yeah.
skull, and he's
Right.
like, that's nice. Why don't you paint some flowers? I'm like, dead ones? So I'm like, only if they're dead. Yeah, so
I just realized I have to do the intro.
Oh yeah, that's like
I haven't done an intro in I don't
in a
know how
long time.
is that Sergio's?
That's
Yeah.
Sergio's thing. Yeah.
Time to shine.
Go for it.
Now I'm getting all nervous. I'm like, how do I do this again? Should have thought about this. I feel like Sergio now. He does like this weird thing right before he starts an intro where he gets super awkward. He's like, are we ready? Are we ready? Okay.
You need to do an impersonation. I think that's the logical way to do this intro.
All right.
Ready?
But Sergio has like a soundboard and then he makes like songs and things. I have
the
none
sound
of that.
effects.
Yeah.
MJ's just got to fill in with the voice.
Yeah, I have nothing.
Are you gonna make my sound effects? You're gonna do sound effects for me?
It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, it'll make sense. Just follow me.
Uh-huh.
Hey everyone, welcome to Wait and Dry, where we shoot guns
Pew pew pew.
and make bombs and feed kittens. See, we still have a soundboard. I'm Josh Lawyer. Today Sergio's out glamping, so we have. Wait, do you want to just introduce yourself?
I guess.
MJ.
MJ.
Yeah.
I'm MJ.
And so your name is Ximena,
Yes.
but it's so confusing to me because my brain is so bad at names that once I see the X, my brain goes like, your name is X.
You are not alone. This has been a running theme throughout my life. Yeah, it's been an experience to have a name that starts with an X. It freaks people out, especially English speakers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
It's
may
more
need to pull your
common.
mic slightly closer.
It's
almost
more.
There?
yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Awesome.
Yay.
Hell yeah.
It's more common in Latin culture to have.
Yeah, but it's kind of an ironic thing because when I was living in Mexico, I went to an American school.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my teachers were Americans and they only spoke English. So they'd be reading like, calling Roland being like, Johnny, here. Stephanie, here. And then they'd be like, Miss Rendon? And I'd be like 8-year-old me, like, here.
Yeah.
So like 8 years old, I'm Miss Rendon, which is ridiculous.
Like, she must be old. She's a mess.
Yeah, I was a miss. It was really weird. And then I come here and, it's the same thing.
Right.
So it's been
I know.
always, even though I lived in Mexico.
When I first met you, and then after, I was like, oh, let me go find your Instagram. And I was like, Ximena, it's probably a J. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know if she exists. She shouldn't have an Instagram.
I'm a phantom.
Yeah. So if you guys are trying to find Ximena, that's Ximena.
MEN.
Oh, yeah.
MENA.
That's right.
And full disclosure, I'm not offended if you ask me how to pronounce my name. It's totally cool. You can ask me 12 times, 13, 14, as many times as you need. It's cool.
What's the weirdest attempt? Have you got any bad ones?
Yeah, very bad ones. I was calling a pharmacy to make sure my prescription was ready. And this is a freaking pharmacist. I'm like, hi, my name is Ximena Rendon, blah, blah, blah. Prescription, da, da, da. And she's like, is your name eczema?
Eczema.
And I'm like, bitch, please, that's a medical condition. That's not a name. You should know as you're a pharmacist.
Right. You should see
So-
that all the time.
Eczema.
Eczema. That is
Yeah.
hilarious.
Yes.
I know the instinct too is like most words that have X in the beginning, you just say X,
Yeah.
like the letter X.
Yes. Yes.
So that's hilarious.
It is.
Well, thank you for doing this, by the way.
Oh,
We
my
got past the
pleasure.
name. So
So yeah.
onward and forward. Yeah, so you work here in Oakland. Have you been here in the Bay Area for a good chunk of your life?
Actually, I've been here since 2007. I moved here to go to school. at the Academy of Art.
You're waiting for me to...
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm just kidding. I have no beef with the art schools. I just
No.
like to try to pick them apart to justify my actions.
Fair enough. I mean, given your work, I think you did the right thing, too. I mean,
Thank you. I
do what
appreciate
you need to do.
it. Yeah. Nice. So you went to school and you started in 2007?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. How was that for you?
Well, I did. So the thing is, I thought I was going to be here for 4 years, that I was going to do undergrad, and then I was going to go back home.
And home being?
Mexico City.
Okay.
And I was like, I'm in, I'm out, I'm back.
Right.
And first semester, I meet a cute guy. 12 years later, we're like, we've been together all this time.
Oh, it's the same guy.
Same guy.
Nice.
Met him the first semester, got together the
Prince Charming.
Yeah. Swiss
Nice.
Prince Charming.
So was he coming for school as well?
Yeah, he's
How
coming
cool.
from school. So yeah, we have a totally dorky art school romance. So
I love
yeah,
Nice.
yeah,
That's
it's kind
cool.
of embarrassing. We met while I was sharpening pencils over a trash can, talking to my friend in Spanish, and this like cute white boy comes up to us, and he's like, habláis español, and he starts speaking to me in Spanish, but in an accent I just can't place, especially coming out of this like really, blonde, blue-eyed dude, and I'm like, huh? And I go, where are you from? And he's like, Switzerland. I'm like, no. Now you need to explain.
Right. How did he know how to speak Spanish?
Well, his mother is from the south of Spain, from Malaga.
Oh,
So his accent is kind of from the south of Spain, and I'm kind of more used to like an accent from like Madrid or that sort of area. So I just could not put two and two together.
So does he have like because I always hear that Spanish people have a slight lisp when they speak Spanish.
Yeah, and just they pronounce the C differently. It's kind of a sound.
Right.
So instead of saying gracias, they say gracias. Or
Right.
Barcelona. So.
Right.
So he's fluent.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
But
okay.
now he's fluent in like, so if he's on the phone with his mom, he sounds like he's from Malaga. He's talking to me, he sounds like he's from Mexico City. So
wow.
it's really cool to see it happen. He doesn't realize it, but he switches the accent completely. So
That's
yeah.
crazy.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
Nice.
that's pretty cool.
What were you studying at the academy?
Oh, I went in for fine art painting.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he and I met, we got together. I finished undergrad, and I kind of felt like I was really half-baked. Like I was like, I'm nowhere where I feel like I need to be. And I really wanted to stay in the Bay because, duh.
Right. Yeah.
And he had just when he got out of school a year before I did, and he just landed a job at Pixar as an animator.
Nice.
So I was like, what the hell am I doing? I got to stay. The only way to stay was to double up and go for grad. So immediately after undergrad, I did grad at the Academy of Art.
Nice.
So I'm a full-fledged product of
Yeah.
the Academy of Art,
You did
for
it all.
better or worse.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was studying animation at the academy.
he went for 3D animation.
That's cool. So how'd you get? So it must be that there's overlapping. I have no idea
Yes.
how art school works.
So what happened was that in the beginning, you have to take like the foundation courses, and he and I met randomly. There was like the winter show where people put in like a really shitty like foundations drawing things, and I went to see that, and I think we had met at a workshop, and then we saw each other there, and I realized, oh, this boy likes me. Oh, that's cute. And
That's
I,
awesome.
at the time, was not, I had a boyfriend in Mexico, so I was like, oh, I don't know about this. But then the next semester, he and I ended up taking a figure drawing class, and I saw him, and I was like, oh, yeah. And then, the boyfriend in Mexico was no more. And,
Nice.
and we moved on.
Yeah.
Awesome. It seemed to have worked out for you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're going on 12 years. And
That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
been living together really like 3 months in, so.
And you guys have a pup.
We have a pup,
Yeah.
the dog child.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like the artist standard. I feel like nowadays it's
Yeah.
gee.
You get too weird otherwise. So much
Yeah.
time by yourself. It just gets weird.
And then there's like the child commitment, which is a big one, especially
Yeah.
for artists. So
Yeah, definitely.
like more power to you if you pursue it. But it seems like a big decision for artists because
Yeah.
in a way our pursuit is such a selfish thing that
It
it's
is.
like I don't know if I'm willing to make that
Yeah.
sacrifice.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and the other thing is that people that are ahead of you are always telling you not to. Like,
Right.
Right.
hey, if you're really serious about this art thing,
Right.
just don't do it. Don't have a
Yeah.
kid. You can't have a kid because if you have a kid, you can't paint anymore. And I have to admit, like I thought that was the case.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if that is the case. I also know that life is bigger than just doing this one thing
Right.
and not doing anything else, because that'll drive you insane, right? I mean, that's such a part of a person's life experience that can really expand your subject matter, the way you think, the way you feel, the things that you value. So I wouldn't, I don't know.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to make that choice for themselves. And,
Yeah.
and I don't kind of judge, like, that can't be the end of your painting career, of your life. It has to be, life is bigger than that.
I think a big fear is that, usually when you have a kid, then you end up working more at your job because, it's based off of cost.
Yeah.
But art is usually a thing where unless you're doing it full time, it's the time that you have that you can kind of fill with wherever you find time. So
Definitely.
So when you look at a child, it's like, well, that would have to take that time up.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that's...
So I get the fear. I mean, I personally don't want kids, but that's just like a personal choice, not necessarily an art reason.
Right.
I mean, but yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing when you meet artists that have kids and you're like, you're doing it. Like, it's a thing.
Yeah, some people pull it off.
Yeah.
Some people
It's definitely doable.
Yeah, some people pull off miracles.
Yeah.
Like one of my friends, Elisa Ivanova, she has 2. And like this woman is incredible. She's formidable. She, has the 2 kids, and she draws and she paints, and she's fucking killing it. So, I see her and I'm like, shit, some people do it. I mean, it's not for everyone, but some people pull it off. And like, Julio Reyes and Candice Bohannon, I don't know if you know their work.
I'd have to see them.
They're really, really cool artists. And, maybe a year ago they had a kid, and, they're both still going strong. So
that's awesome.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
And it seems like some people get like a wind under their wings.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people, I think, end up almost creating better work at times, but I've also seen it go the opposite way.
I'm sure. Like,
so it's I've seen.
Yeah, you never know which one you are.
Right, so. Exactly. Like I've seen artists that I really admire become mothers, and then they just kind of like, what happened?
Yeah.
So but I've heard where people have children, and then they're like, it pushed me in a whole nother direction and made me see other things that I didn't see, and they gained more passion. They had lost a passion and gained it after they had children.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
So after art school, what was your next kind of step?
Well, the thing with the next step was, my visa was going to be over because I'm a Mexican citizen, obviously. And you get like an extra year after that. So one of my main motivations for staying at the Academy of Art was that they sponsor your visa, right? Because otherwise you can't stay. Like there are a bunch of like cool schools that I could have gone to had I had a visa, or if I was a U.S. citizen, that I probably would have gone to, but it was just not a possibility. Like there's no way. So in the midst of all this, my now husband, then boyfriend, was in the process of getting getting a visa. His visa was sponsored through Pixar, and eventually they can help you get a green card. So in that process, he eventually was on the track to get a green card, and he had been, because obviously we didn't want to be a part of we wanted to keep this thing going. So,
Does he do his own artwork as well? Does he have like, I mean, if he studied animation, does he have like his own kind of side thing that is only his?
Yes. Actually, he just released his first short film, which is a film called Space Sharks. You can check that out on YouTube.
So cool.
Link in my bio on Instagram. But yeah, it's called Space Sharks, and it was his take on doing a PSA to save sharks, because he's really big into sharks and marine biology. And the thing is, he was always telling me is that there's a lot of scientists that are doing really cool things for conservation, but scientists are not really good storytellers. So they, just rant facts at people, and people are just like rolling their eyes. So this was kind of his attempt to combine, doing a PSA that was actually entertaining and created some kind of emotional connection.
That's awesome. Was it an animation as well?
Yeah, he did it in 2D, and it's pretty cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
Is that the direction he would want to go at some point, kind of open his own animation?
I don't know. I mean, I don't. Yeah, this is very nebulous. We'll see maybe one day, but for now, he's he really enjoys his job. It gives him a lot of opportunities to meet cool people and just people doing interesting things. It's a job with a lot of like cool perks.
Yeah.
So it's hard to leave that.
Yeah. Does he? Is he a critique of your work, or like is able to help you with?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But it's cool because he comes from he sees things differently. Of course, like a very visual guy, but he's not going to be like, oh, I don't know, you really need to soften that edge. It's really bothering me.
Yeah.
It's kind of a more, general read. There are things that he can pick up because obviously he has the vocabulary to deal with that sort of stuff. Right. But that's not the first thing that comes up.
Right.
So it's super helpful. I mean, we help each other out. Like, while he was making his film, he was like, "Hey, come check this out. What do you think?" Be like, "Oh, I don't know. Maybe this is really funny. Maybe this, this is kind of weird."
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's also. I mean, I'm not familiar with what's the YouTube clip called again?
The film is called Space Sharks.
Space Sharks. I'm not familiar with it, but in my head, I'm imagining a very cartoonish image, and then if you put that next to like your work, which seems to have a very dark narrative throughout it, it's kind of funny to think of those two things coming from the same home.
Yeah, no, it's pretty whack. Like I am all darkness, he's all light, so I guess we balance each other out.
That's cool. But does that match personality-wise, or is it just in content?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general he's kind of a more optimistic, kind of positive guy, and I'm a little bit more kind of reticent and suspicious and somewhat paranoid, just a little bit, just the right amount to keep me alive.
I think that's a good move.
Yeah, I mean, you need one of the couple being like, I don't know about this, man. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely MJ, probably, right?
I feel like I'm more paranoid.
Yeah.
Well, like as a smaller mammal of the pair, you're the one that walks in a world where you're like, okay, this is not super safe. Like, you're a tall guy. You have an imposing figure. So you move in the world in a very different way than someone like me and MJ.
This is something I've recently learned. Very recently.
Yeah, it's very different.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's all right. We'll just walk down this dark alley. Who cares?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's just been.
Oh, I see.
It's something too, like Josh and I have been doing murals recently, and I've realized like I do not, it's crazy for me to think of, there's a ton of female muralists killing it right now, and it's like them being out there by themselves.
Plus like working late hours.
Yeah, like I'm just like, I don't know how you guys do it. I'm assuming, I hope that they have like friends and stuff. Maybe it's just me. Yeah. I'm paranoid, but I do not like being out in like a public space painting with like my back to like it just doesn't sound.
Sometimes you're not in a great neighborhood.
Exactly.
I mean,
a lot of the time I feel like you're not in a good neighborhood.
That's what you do. You get 5 like pepper sprays, and you hook them onto your scissor lift, and you have like a pull switch that ignites all of them.
And the mirror.
And
I know that's
and the gas mask, and you just put it on. You're just like, and then you shoot up to the top and just wait it out.
Yeah, I was just thinking you have like spoons like all over your
so you can see.
Yeah. You ever see those bike helmets with like the little mirror? You just have those.
Dude, I live in Berkeley. You see that shit all the time. You see dudes in the grocery store with the fucking bike helmet and the little mirror checking who's behind them in the line.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. It's just different. It's just different being it's just different being female.
Oh God, yeah.
So out of high school, did you pursue just art shows? Is that kind of the route you took, like gallery work? And
no, I wish I had actually. I mean, I think I always knew I wanted to be an artist and that I would go into the arts and visual arts, but it's not that my family wasn't supportive and they were like, no, you can't do this, but they were kind of discouraging, like, I don't know about this. Maybe you need to kind of think about it. And as a teenager, I was very kind of unfocused, and I knew what I wanted, but I didn't know how to get it done, if that makes any sense. I know it sounds really stupid, but I just kind of was not, I was kind of lost. So I spent some time traveling. I lived abroad for a while. I lived in Paris for a year.
Nice.
Yeah, that was nice. Then I came back to Mexico for a short stint, and eventually I moved to Italy for like 6 months. I lived in Florence, and then I came back. So I was always kind of bouncing around and never kind of found my footing. And at some point I was like, fuck it, I'm not going to college. I'm just going to paint. And I was taking some like drawing and painting classes in Mexico City and kind of doing that. And I just wasn't finding something that allowed me to kind of progress. I was my life had no structure. So yeah, it was just kind of a bit of a waste. And then at one point, a friend of mine who is a really good friend of mine that I went to high school with, he's a diver, and he was working in a dive shop in the southeast of Mexico, in this place that's relatively near to Tulum, for people to like kind of get an idea where it is geographically. And he's like, hey, I just got this job. They're giving me a place to stay for free. Do you want to come out? And I had like nothing going on. I was like, fuck it, I'll go. So I went and I moved to the Caribbean for like 7 months. And I was just kind of like literally like walking around doing like little landscapes of like the Caribbean Ocean, just totally lost. And at one point, one of the few times, maybe like the only time in my life that my dad intervened was then. He's like, you know what? You have to go to college now or I won't pay for it.
Wow.
And he'd never said something like that. So I was like, okay. This is the one consequence in my entire life that he said. He's like, if you don't go within the next 3 or 4 months, I don't care. And I was like, fuck. So when I had graduated from high school, I'd done all this like research for colleges, yada, yada, yada. And in my research, I found the Academy of Art, and it was like, oh, this is a school where I could probably start, do a year and maybe transfer to a school that, I don't know, was different. Because there's no real admission process. It's like, you can afford it, you can come in.
Right.
So I was like, well, if I have 3 months to get to school, this is the best way to go about doing it.
For sure.
So I was like, okay, fuck it. I'm going to pack my bags and I'm going to go. So I got myself together and, moved to San Francisco.
Yeah.
That was that.
That's awesome. And then you were sharpening a pencil. And you dropped a pencil and you went to reach for it, and then another guy and you met each other's
Locked eyes. And, the room started spinning. There was idyllic music, and the rest is history.
So after going to the academy, did you pursue art? Like, did you pursue galleries then, or what was your kind of?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard because you get out of school and nobody's telling you how to do things. And you see people that get picked up, and you're like, oh, that's so cool, but I have no idea how to do this.
Right.
While I was still in college, I had met Irene, like everybody, and I had done a couple of things with like Wonderland and the chillin' shows that she did.
Can I do something real quick? Irene! That was Sergio would have pushed that button on his sound thingy. So.
Fair enough. I mean, how many shout outs has Irene gotten on this podcast?
All of them.
All of them.
Yeah.
She deserves them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that's the first gallery I ever showed in. And
that's awesome.
Whenever she had a request, she's like, hey, I'm doing this show. I'd be like, yep.
Yeah.
Anything she asked, I was like, yep.
I know.
If I could manage it, I'd do it. So
that's every artist.
That's every artist
experience. You're like, she asked, I don't have time to do it, but I did it.
Yeah. That's how it is. You do it.
That's one of the issues that I have with art school. Like, I've always wanted to go. I feel like it's been a very tough kind of like self-taught road to where I am. I know Josh too, but I wish that art school could teach people like, this is how you get into galleries. Like, I'm assuming they have classes like that, but I don't think it's realistic.
Well,
and like, I don't know how you...
I mean, what they do is they have this class. It's called Professional Practices, and it's a necessary evil. And they go through like, okay, this is, design a website. This is what it should look like. This is what a resume looks like. This is a template. Fill it out. And I have all that shit down, and it's all in my computer, and I update it, and da-da-da-da-da. And when I do have to deal with a gallery, I do send those things out. But there's no teaching you like, okay, they'll tell you like, okay, you look up galleries and you find one that kind of fits your work, and then you reach out to them. And here's the like 10 archaic formats in which you reach out to them and see if they respond. And I was trying to do that, and I have to tell you, like, I wasn't getting a lot of responses, right? Like just sending out an email and kind of doing that. And what's been really cool about working in the gallery at Show Gallery where I work now is seeing artists come in and do that dance that I didn't know how to do.
Right.
And you see some like really good things, like people that really like carry themselves really well, that they make a connection with the gallerist, that they come in the right time and they're confident and and they present themselves in a really successful way.
I'm taking notes right now.
I'll get into it. And then you see people that come in and they're like, just like crazy people with like chewing on themselves, and they're like, my art, look it. And they're like, what are you doing? You crazy person. It's just, you know, it's very interesting to see that. And I mean, nobody's born knowing how to do this. And I feel really privileged to experience this because I've seen literally the best way and the worst way within a week. And it's just like, whoa.
That's hilarious.
So yeah, kind of like the thing is the personal connection, I think, right? Because it's really easy to ignore an email or something like that. But if you come in and you look at the art and you know, present yourself like a, you know, human person that you are, and you look at the art and kind of make a connection, it's much more likely that they're going to look at your work. Because, you know, gallerists are people too, you know, they have hearts. They connect.
I think one of the issues might be that a lot of artists seem to be like wallflowers that kind of their way of communicating is through art. So when you're like, you have to speak to people, they're like, well, I don't do that.
That's definitely the case. And some people are lucky if you're a real wallflower and your work is outstanding. Your work will do it for you. Other times, maybe your work's not quite there yet, but you could be in a gallery. Maybe you're not making your masterpieces quite yet, or like really, I don't know, awesome paintings. But they're, you know, some people will like them. And that's where, you know, the being a person kicks in, where you have to come in and like shake hands and make eye contact and do that. And I've learned a ton working in the gallery about that, because it is, you do see like the full range of like human experience. You know?
And I think another thing too is like, when I first met Ximena, she still talks about today that I was just like this very shy person that barely ever talked and only hung out with my group of friends. And you know, when you're young, that's just kind of, and you're a wallflower, it's just kind of who you are. And I think you can work towards not being that. It just takes time. So even if you're like, I want to show at galleries, it just might take time. You just might have to like, you know, put in that effort of the being able to talk to people, communicating.
Well, now you're doing a podcast. You seem to be doing just fine.
Yeah, I'm fine. I mean, even doing this, it like teaches me how to have a better, how to conversate with people better and listen to people better, which is a thing I realized I didn't do that well when I first started. And Sergio's still learning how to conversate with you guys.
He's still working on it. I think we all are. I
mean, for sure.
I think, so in Mexico, people are really social, and like as a country, we're very extroverted and just kind of very jokey and talky and, you know, out there. And when I came here, I realized that I had to kind of like rein that back in, because people like their personal space a little bit more. If you meet somebody, you don't hug and kiss them. You give awkward shoulder hugs. I don't want to touch your body type of a thing. So I had to kind of like rein that in. And I think I overcompensated for that. So I kind of became somewhat like more rigid. And with the spending so much time in the studio kind of by myself with my headphones and my podcasts and just kind of out of it, I kind of gained this like weird awkwardness that was kind of foreign. And one of the good
America will do that to you.
It will, because one thing I always bring up is that there is no word for awkward in Spanish. There's strange, which is raro or something like that, but awkward, like even the way awkward is spelled, it's like, now just the way the letters look, it looks awkward and uncomfortable. No, it's very angular. And that's just not a thing in Spanish. So yeah, I gained this kind of like layer of awkwardness that I'm constantly trying to kind of take off, because it's not entirely natural. It's not entirely my own. And that's one of the things that kind of working in a gallery does, because you have to make small talk, you have to, you know, chit chat and like be a host, right? You know, there's openings and you're like serving wine and what do you need and how can I help you? So that's also like another muscle that's being flexed. That's super, you know, helpful in being a person in the world that has to communicate. So,
I'm curious. So going back to the gallery stuff, what would you say the ideal like walk-in would be? Because the weird thing is, like, say like 19-year-old MJ, I walked into an art gallery in San Francisco. I'm like, yeah, can I have a solo show here? And it's like, I brought in my 6-foot pieces. I brought like 5 of them, didn't make any sense. I mean, the
Yeah.
artwork was, 19 years old.
Yeah.
As good as a 19-year-old is, because
Yeah.
sometimes, anyway.
It happens.
But it's like, the gallerist was nice, and, they told me, like, hey, come back 5 years from now,
Yeah.
like, very honest
Yeah.
and give me a good critique.
Yeah.
But it's like, at the other hand of it, there's been other galleries that kind of give you a cold shoulder.
Yeah.
There's
a lot of that.
So it's like, what, when you're like, oh, you need to go in and come in at the right time, what is the right time? Like, what is the ideal?
The right time is never at an opening. Do
Right.
not ever show up at an opening and monopolize the gallerist.
Right.
Do
Right.
not do it. It's disrespectful to the other artists. It's disrespectful to the gallerist, because if you take their time, you're taking their time to make sales, which
Right.
is what keeps the lights on and the rent paid and all of that. So never, ever, ever approach a gallerist to show your work at an opening. That being said, that's like the biggest faux pas in the world.
Yeah.
Research the gallery, like look at their hours, right? So generally at our gallery, for instance, we're open Monday through Saturday. I mean, Wednesday through Saturday, and we open at noon and we go to 6, right? So chances are that on a Wednesday at like 1, not a lot happening, right? Because people are at work,
Right.
So come in at a time where it's going to be more quiet. Definitely, if you can avoid the weekend, that's better. And come in close to opening hours, because not much is going on.
Yeah.
So that's a time where the gallerist is just kind of like chilling and, whatever, doing whatever that you're doing, but there's not...
YouTubing.
Yeah, YouTubing. Usually reading the news and like screaming silently in their brain, like, no! So that's a good time to come in. And one of the best people that ever came in to our gallery was this guy. He comes in, looks at the art on the walls, says hello to the 2 dogs that are co-working in the gallery, checks out the art, and he's like, hey, your gallery is really beautiful. This is really a very beautiful space. Do you ever show photography here? And, the gallerist is like, oh, we show photography maybe once a year. Unfortunately, as much as I like photography, it's something that's hard to sell, because everyone has a camera in their pocket and they all think they're photographers. So, they
We
got
all are photographers.
Yeah, we all are. Bad ones. We all are.
Yeah.
So, he had kind of a conversation with the gallerist, and then he pulls out of his bag this square envelope that was silver, and he hands it over to her, and he hands one over to me, and he's like, ladies, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I hope you have a great day, and see you later.
Okay.
This is for you. Okay, whatever. He walks away, and I'm like on my computer doing my drawings, because when it's quiet in the gallery, I'm sketching stuff for future paintings. And it was just sitting on my desk, and I figured, okay, I'll open it. And I open it, and it's this small card that folds out, and in it are 3 or 4 of his images, with like a little blurb explaining who he was, and you were looking at his gorgeous like gelatin print photography, and it had his info, and that was it. I was like, that is so smooth.
Smooth
awesome.
criminal.
He's a smooth par excellence. Smooth criminal.
What you didn't see is down the block he dropped the mic.
Oh no, like totally.
And someone was like, sir, you dropped that. He was like, I know.
Yeah.
He kept walking.
Yeah, no.
That's brilliant.
It was brilliant.
Yeah.
Like, it was super classy. It was not pushy. He made a connection. This happened in like December of last year.
Right, but
and
it still
I'm
sticks
still
out,
tripping.
yeah.
I'm still tripping.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
still have his card. And I'm
Right.
like, this is a really good way of doing it. And
Yeah.
like,
That's awesome.
for instance, I'm not a really good person on Instagram to like post constantly. I'm, as I've mentioned before, I'm an introvert. So the idea of like putting a video of me painting just like gives me anxiety that I would like crawl up the wall, like, I don't know, the little girl in the ring, like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, to see somebody do that in a way that's kind of analog and just really stylish and cool was like, wow. So you can reach out in whatever way
Right.
suits your personality.
Right.
It doesn't have to be, just doing the Instagram thing or
Yeah.
And some-
you
That's
can,
smart.
but
yeah.
And sometimes like the wallflower in public can seem like an outgoing person on Instagram.
exactly.
So they can
Exactly.
kind of build a persona, and maybe not even a
Yeah,
persona, but
that's
just
true.
build their work and pursue it that way rather
Yeah.
than feeling awkward in a gallery trying to say
Yeah.
hello. And then maybe they can, there's just different routes nowadays, which
Yeah.
is a positive. And
I think so too. I mean, if you manage to conquer your own challenges, like your introversion via Instagram, dude,
Right.
do it.
for sure.
If you can manage to like convince yourself to go into a gallery
Yeah.
personally and make that connection, that, you know,
Yeah.
you're only going to deal with maybe one person or two people. You know, if you're on Instagram and your account is public, there's a ton of people looking at that
Yeah.
potentially. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or not.
Or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did something similar right around the same, like 1920, where I was trying to approach galleries I hadn't shown anywhere yet. And what I did was I took a little disc and printed like one of my art thingies on top and then handed that out.
Yeah.
And there were some galleries that appreciated that, but the problem was that the disc didn't work at everyone's computer.
That's always a problem.
It would have been better if they put it in. It was just a mixtape you made.
Yeah.
All your
With my
guilty pleasures.
MJ's mix, MJ's hot mix.
It's just like a dark art students mix. You're just like, I'm a creep.
MJ's
Weirdo.
dance mix.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, that was, I mean, it was an attempt at that time,
Yeah.
but
Well,
Yeah.
but that's, you know, that suited your personality at the time. Like, I mean, if you're doing this now, you could refine it or tweak it a little bit.
Right.
No?
And
Yeah.
no one's handing discs around anymore.
nobody,
No.
nobody has like
Right.
No.
the computer
yeah.
part.
No,
That's
forget about
kinda-
the disc. My computer doesn't, you can't even put a USB.
I know.
It's like,
Oh, I know.
you have to have the attachment that you can insert the USB and like blah, blah, blah.
So you're saying you have an Apple.
Yeah, well, I'm a victim. I'm
We
a
all
victim.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I wanted to talk a bit about subject matter, yours being very dark. And I noticed that like you talk about death a lot in your work, or it seems like you talk about death a lot in your work. You seem to talk about potential afterlife in your work, and like almost like a, I don't know how to, maybe like a spiritual kind of like, not necessarily religious, but more of like the spiritual realm. So like maybe like ghost and like dream worlds and these type of things, which is kind of like an unknown and a human thing. But I know you're from Mexico, so I assume that there is this cultural acceptance with death. I think a little bit more accepting of talking about it. I mean, they
Yeah.
have Day of the Dead.
Yeah, that's my favorite holiday.
And then what's interesting to me was when thinking about your work, I thought like, oh, like she talks about death a lot, and I know you're Mexican, but there's a weird like, I wouldn't be able to place that through your work.
Yeah,
There's
definitely.
no like obvious aesthetic pointing to your culture, but it seems like a comfort to talk about these things.
Yeah.
Was that always been kind of a thing?
Well, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a cultural aspect. I am Mexican. Day of the Dead is like, my personal favorite holiday.
Right.
So there's an openness to death. But I think the thing that kind of made death ubiquitous in my life was actually losing my mother. She died a few years ago.
Sorry.
And thank you. And it's not that I didn't think that it could happen, but it was very unexpected and kind of, she became ill and spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and, you know, it was atrocious. Like, because I was living in San Francisco and they were in Mexico. So by the time I got to Mexico, she was in a coma and never woke up again. So it was pretty brutal because before that, she was a woman that played tennis every day whilst wearing lipstick. She was a lady. And, you know,
People
just...
getting mad by that.
Yeah, exactly. Just seemed very kind of full of life. So the idea of having someone, even though she was, you know, an older lady, she just wasn't frail in any way. And to see somebody go, you know, just in the blink of an eye was really, really shocking.
For sure.
And that was a very kind of traumatic period in my life. I was in the middle of the master's program, and my dad was paying for school. And after she passed away, because there was some issues with his insurance, he ended up having to pay all of her medical bills, and he got cleaned out. And it was like, I'm in the middle of the master's, like planning my thesis, and he's like, I can't pay for school anymore. And that's a problem because that was also my visa. So it was kind of a really messy situation.
Right.
So that was like not only the death thing, but also the financial thing, and like being here and not being able to work because, again, I'm a Mexican citizen.
Right.
And just being like, okay, I've worked all these years to get this done, to get this master's.
all leading to that point.
All leading to this point, and now it can all kind of fall apart.
Right.
So it was really traumatic.
Yeah.
It was really
And
scary.
in a way, it was kind of falling apart.
It was.
Yeah. So
So
damn, life is brutal in that way.
And when it rains, it pours. So
it
it was
rains, it
just like
pours.
everything on top of everything.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the thing that really made me very aware of the precariousness of life.
Mhm.
And it's funny because after that happened, 2 of my best friends lost a parent within months. Actually, 3 of them. Then my husband, he lost a good friend of his to a heart attack, and the guy was like 28. So this was all in like a rapid succession. And, you don't die because you're old. You die because you're alive.
Right.
So to me, it became like, no. I mean, being old isn't a bad thing. You're lucky if you get to
Right.
be old because, your youth doesn't exempt you for fucking dying.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was very traumatic for me. And really, like all of these paintings of skulls in the beginning, I did a lot of paintings where it was like a still life, just a single object, and it usually was a skull placed in a certain way that made you feel somewhat uncomfortable. And that's what that was about. It was about dealing with death. And I'm not a religious person. I would say I'm not very religious. I'm like the black sheep of the family. I never went to Catholic school, unlike everybody else in my family. So they're like, what is up with your values? And I'm like, what do you mean?
Right.
While you're painting a bunch of dead things.
Yeah, exactly. That really freaks me. Like, that's not
I'm
something
sure.
that my dad's like super
So
happy about,
Yeah.
because like this happened like right after my mom died, and he's like, show me your paintings, and I'm like, skull,
Yeah.
skull, and he's
Right.
like, that's nice. Why don't you paint some flowers? I'm like, dead ones. So I'm like, only if they're dead. Yeah. So
What was your subject matter before?
I didn't really know. I mean, I was painting a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
I did gravitate towards still life because I like that you could control the light and make it very theatrical with like very, very intense contrast between light and dark. So when I started thinking about the subject of death, the first, like most obvious symbol of death in like any culture is a skull. There's no other way about it.
Right.
So that was kind of like the transition, and it kind of built on that.
There is a thing you do too when talking about death in your work where it's not necessarily skulls or anything. Like you have 2 pieces called Jane Doe and John Doe.
Yeah.
And it's this weird thing where the 2 people, there's 2 separate paintings, and it's a guy and a girl laying down, and it's like the palette you chose plus like this like cold surface they're laying on kind of implies that they're dead. I mean, the title also implies it as well, which I'm a fan of. So it's like this cool kind of thing where it's uneasy to look at, but it's kind of a beautiful figure, like male and female figure there. So it's like this interesting, like we're not allowed to say juxtapose on this podcast. So
Yeah, no, it's not allowed.
yeah. We call it next to each other side by side thingy where you
Side by
compare
side
them.
comparison.
Yeah, exactly.
They're complementary paintings.
Yeah. There's 2 things next to each other in this painting that are contradicting each other in a weird way, but make it more interesting to see.
Yes.
I should just learn the definition of juxtaposition.
Just read that off every time.
Yeah, it's very, and then just read it.
Yeah, just read the definition.
Yeah. How did that idea in general was interesting to me, how you did
cool.
that. So what was like the process of kind of that idea?
Well, it was again like thinking about death in terms of like people think that you're exempt from death because you're young.
Right.
And like, yeah, sure, if you're in your mid-20s, it's likely that the only people you know that have died are grandparents, right? Or maybe you're unlucky enough to know someone that died in a car accident, something like that. But as you get older, you realize that people start dying on you.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're lucky, it's not you or someone that you love, no?
Right.
But the older you get, the more people that you know start
Right.
dying, and it doesn't really match up with age.
Right.
So my whole point was to get these very beautiful young models that looked full of life and portray them dead.
Right.
Yeah.
No, because sometimes people think of beauty and death as 2 things that are opposed. But
Right.
hey, if you see a beautiful dead person, they're still beautiful and they're still dead. And those are 2
Right.
contradictory things that happen at the same time. And
For sure. That's
And
awesome.
that's kind of the feeling. And I really, when I made those paintings, my feeling, I wanted it to feel like somebody had pulled open a morgue drawer,
Right.
and that's what you had seen, and,
Yeah.
and just kind of I wanted to make people uncomfortable. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
Because it is, you know.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
It's a beautiful image,
Even-
but it's I don't want to make people at that time. I did not want to make people comfortable. I wanted to
Right.
make them uncomfortable because I was very uncomfortable
Right.
because
Right.
of everything that I
For sure.
mentioned that was going on in my life.
Yeah, even
So-
the title can be taken to make you more uneasy because
Yeah.
it's literally a title meaning kind of like that this person isn't known, or if you want to like
Lost.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a lot of dark
Yeah. I was dealing with a lot then.
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Do you listen to true crime?
I did for a while, but as I said, I'm naturally a little paranoid.
Right.
So that just kind of makes me more paranoid. And I
Yeah.
get real weird.
Right.
So I try to like not do that. What happened also is that in my paranoia, the Trump administration happened, and as a Mexican citizen and green card holder,
Right.
this is something that just has made me really paranoid. So now what I listen to like a junkie is news and podcasts about politics, and I'm very well informed about what's going on in my surroundings because I feel threatened.
Right.
And
Right.
just FYI, even if you are a green card holder, they can take you, and they do this to U.S. citizens that just look brown. So,
Right.
this is why we feel paranoid. It's
Right.
It's justified.
it's kind of justified. Like, I'll do things like, I'll go in the morning to walk my dog in the park, and I forgot my wallet. And, like, I'm driving, and I'm like, I know I'm in Berkeley, California. It should be cool here, but just the idea that I don't have my wallet, and I don't have any ID, and, like, anything can happen,
Right.
it freaks me out.
For
Like,
sure.
I'm like, oh my God, I have to get home. And
Yeah.
Right.
that's, it shouldn't be this way.
No.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's what they did on purpose.
Yeah, that's the whole
That's
point.
the point.
That's the
And-
whole point. And, like, it's just to terrify a whole group of people. And
Right.
it just,
And then
It
incite
takes a
the
real-
whole group. It's also
Yeah.
like it's a polarizing topic. So there's a
Yeah.
group of people that are happy that this is happening,
Yeah.
and there's a group of people who are terrified
Yeah.
that this is happening.
I think the people that are terrified is larger than the
Mhm.
group that
Right.
is happier. And that's one of the
Right.
things I'm really, truly thankful for.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I'm a green card holder. I'm a legal resident.
Right.
I love being here. I've been here for 12 years.
Mhm.
I want to have a life here.
Mhm.
But I live under a certain degree of stress that is
Right.
abnormal. And I know anybody that looks vaguely Hispanic or has a Hispanic name, or even if you are a U.S. citizen, that is traumatic. You know,
Mhm.
like
For
you
sure.
feel under siege. So instead of listening to true crime things, I'm generally just listening to stuff about
Politics.
Yeah, which is something I wasn't engaged with before, and it's interesting because now I can't vote.
Right.
I'm super into it. It's
I'm-
disturbing.
I'm like I've like taken a break from all that because it's like I'm so burnt out by
Yeah.
It's truly upsetting. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's just constant negativity.
Mhm.
all the time.
I was
And-
obsessed for a little bit, and then I was getting just like
Yeah.
it was hard for me
Yeah.
to dig myself back out of that,
Yeah.
just like those lows,
Yeah.
because it's just like, it's all meant to make people scared.
Yeah.
And it
And
was
we have, I mean, I don't want to turn this into a podcast about politics, but we have babies in cages. Like, let's
Right.
not fuck around. So if you can vote, please vote, because people like me can't.
Yeah.
Right.
Want to
For
live
sure.
here without being terrified. So,
Right.
Yeah.
PSA. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that's like
Yeah.
a contrast with my husband and I, because my husband is, tall, white, blonde, blue-eyed.
Right.
Mhm.
And he's also a green card holder.
Right.
But if he forgets his ID, they're never going to, they're going to deport him to Switzerland? Are you
Right.
kidding
Right.
me? No. Screw that. But
Yeah.
I live in terror, and I'm like, dude, but this is the situation. And
Right.
he's like, chill. And I'm like, no, you don't get it.
Mhm.
So there's this constant, like, him being like, it's okay. And I'm
Mhm.
being like, no, it's
Right.
not okay.
Right.
It's so not okay.
Right.
But
There's just a
that's
little
always
disconnect,
interesting.
yeah.
But it's also, I also think it's important. Like it goes back to like one worrying and one being like
Right.
Yes.
relaxed.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
it has to or if you both worry, I feel like it's
No, forget
It's
about
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Forget about it. No.
If you're both paranoid, then it's just like
yeah. Then it can just it just goes deeper. So I think you have to have pushback.
yeah, you
Yeah,
have-
no, it's perfect. I'm very happy about the way things are
But I totally get
with
it.
us.
It's also like a weird thing to try to put we were talking about earlier about putting yourself in people's perspective. You know, like me, MJ being the more vulnerable than person compared to me. It's like it's hard for me to remember that and to feel that and be like, oh yeah, if I had a person 3 times my size walking around this planet who could potentially do anything they wanted to me, of course I would be afraid of that person.
It's like when you see a Chihuahua meet a big dog. That's what it's like to be female. You're like, oh my god, you start barking in your head. Hopefully not out loud, but in your head. I don't know what you're gonna do.
Except for some Chihuahuas are like, I am going to murder that big dog. And the big dog's like, well, wait, leave me alone. I didn't do anything wrong. Yeah. Which is our dog situation.
I can imagine.
A giant scaredy cat who's like
always
afraid of
getting
Chihuahuas.
picked on. Yeah.
So I don't know how that works into the analogy, but figured I should mention it.
Fair enough.
Have you been back to Mexico recently?
The last time I was there, I went there in May. Yeah.
How is the art scene? We've heard from Eden that the art scene's amazing. I don't know how there might be a difference in saying it's amazing as a gallery owner versus being an artist and trying to find.
But she said it's amazing mural wise too, like their mural.
I mean, that's the tradition. I mean, really, like if you look back to like the Mexican muralists, blah blah blah, art history. But that exists. I can't. I
love blah blah blah's work.
Blah 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 is fabulous. No, I mean, I can't really speak to that with authority because. In reality, like ever since I moved here, I've been living here. You know, whenever I've gone back to see family. I've gone back kind of in very restrictive terms. So I can't say that I'm really very like aware of what's going on there, like gallery wise or anything.
Yeah.
I do have friends that are artists in Mexico and like they work and they teach and you know they often try to like get American artists to come down and do workshops and that sort of thing. And there's a hunger for it, definitely. You know. But it's not something I can really elaborate on. It's funny, you leave a place for long enough and it becomes foreign to you as well.
Right.
So that's interesting to go back and be like, oh wow, that's really cool. Like I took that completely for granted.
Yeah, that is a weird thing. That would be a cool thing to take to like try to tackle through art. Explaining, because it's also weird when you leave a place and you go back and the people that are like if you go and you visit your family and you feel slightly on the outside, like everyone's got inside jokes or whatever, and you're like it's like almost like you're visiting.
You become foreign as well. I mean 12 years is a really long time, and like 12 years in a period of time in your life which is really formative, where you really come into your own being an adult and having your own opinions and taking care of your own stuff. To then go back, it's like they don't understand you and you don't understand them, and it's just like, this is weird. I love Mexico, I love my culture, I love a lot of things about it, but in being away from it, you see a lot of like the negative things that you got used to. Right. That you just like, oh, I'm going to drive home after going to a bar and I'm going to take a different route tonight because last night I took this other route, and you can never take the same route home, and you're constantly having to worry about your own security. There's a lot of misogyny. There's a lot of stuff that, isn't great, but it's countered by really warm people that are, really funny, great storytellers. There's great food. So many good things. So it's a juxtaposition. But
that's cool.
I don't get back enough, though. That's true.
In your work, I mentioned titles, but going through like your titles, I thought it was super interesting because a lot of them, I mean, I'm a big fan of titles in general, so sometimes there was like I think there's like one where the guy's like kind of his back is to it, and I forget what the title. Penumbra, and I was like, I have no idea what that was, and I looked it up, and I was like, oh, that's a cool like use of that word that I'm not familiar with.
I think about those things a lot. A lot of the times when I'm working on a painting, I don't know what I'm going to call it. So like I'll shoot photo references and I'll give it a working title, like something stupid, that can just identify the image when I need to pull it up. And it really isn't until I finished it that I know exactly what the title is going to be. And usually it's like a feeling, a mood that I want to evoke. So let's say I'll come up with like a stupid word, just something really basic like shadow, and I'll start looking. I'll go and look for words that relate to it, But penumbra came to me because in Spanish penumbra is a word that you do use and it means shadows. So that helps, having the two languages where I was like, oh, this would work in Spanish, penumbra, and then I looked it up in English and I'm like, oh, that really works. And that's kind of how I go about it. But I tend to like a one-word title because I just want to capture this like mood, this awesome. Small moment.
I like that.
Thank you.
How do you guys feel about, so I used to have a mentor when I was like 15 and she taught me how to paint with acrylic for a little bit. She's much older, but I met with her recently after she got cancer she we just like had lunch one day and she told me that she never had kids, so she said she thinks her paintings are her children.
Okay.
So she's very attached to her paintings, and every time she has a painting, it's like letting a child go. Like, you know, you make it, you love it, but you have to let it go type of thing. Yeah. But she is adamant about titles. And she said if you do not title your work, and then, because a lot of the time I'll title something and then forget, like if that image from 5 years ago comes up, I'm like, I don't remember what I named that. She says that means that you're not putting enough into that artwork because it's not sticking out like that. It's like, it's interesting, but it's hard because you know, like we've said before, like as an artist, I have a hard time with words already. Yeah. So I'm always kind of scrambling to try to come up with something.
Thesaurus.com, man. It's your best friend.
But it's just, I thought that was an interesting concept.
I don't know if I would agree. I mean, if that's her process, I'm perfectly fine with it. But I don't know. I always forget my titles. And I always forget like little things I put in my art. And sometimes I'll like see an old painting and then I'll read the title and I'll look through it and I start like picking apart everything and I'm like, oh yeah, that's what that was. And I start having to like figure out my own painting because it's just been too long. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I forgot I did that. Oh, that's like a cool little idea. I should do that more and things like that. But it's like the title to me is always just a clue of what I'm talking about. Just like most things I put into my piece are just kind of trying to control the narrative or help you through what I'm trying to say. Right. And so I'm not going to remember the title, but reading a title back, I go like, okay, this kind of puts me in a place where I can figure some things out.
Yeah, it's kind of, it has to be a clue. You can't give it all away.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, my paintings aren't my babies. My dog's my baby.
Yeah, I completely agree. My paintings are not my babies. Yeah. I enjoy painting them. I enjoy sitting with them. I use them to get out the things I need to get out into the world without becoming a ranting, raving lunatic. But no, I do not want them in my house. I do not want them in my studio. I want them to go to the world and find new homes and go on and have their own adventures. Because that way I can sit home and make more paintings.
Right.
So,
Do you guys, you don't have your artwork in your house, like hung or anything?
I have the few pieces that I have that are mine are generally birthday presents for my husband, which is kind of a funny thing. I have a tendency to paint him from behind. So he'll usually be looking out. It's usually looking out into the ocean because, like I said, it's his favorite thing in the world. So just I have vacations and just places we've been every time we're like seaside. He's like climbing on rocks and I'm the one with the camera. So it's always like him climbing on rocks in some sort of a way or staring off into the ocean at night. And I have a couple of those paintings that I've made for him. And it's just curious. I've never painted his portrait and I've always wanted to. But there's something, I don't know. I have these paintings. It's just him, the back of his head, looking off into the distance, and they mean a lot to me. But I hopefully to him as well. But that's the sort of thing I have in my house. Like every now and again, I'll get a painting back from a gallery, and I might hang it temporarily. But then I get sick of it. I'm also really lucky to have awesome friends that, if I will pose for them, for some of their references, they're super generous and they're like, oh, here, because you posed for me a whole bunch of times. And it's really awesome. I have a lot of drawings from Nadezhda on my wall. Nice. We've done a lot of, like, both me and Stefan have posed for Nadia. And, we've done cool stuff together. And, it's been really cool that, we get home and we have all these, like, really cute little drawings that are hers.
Yeah, that's
Did you guys meet in school?
It's actually funny. My husband and Nadia met in school. they overlapped for a while, but then Nadia left the Academy of Art to go to the Safe House Atelier. And it's such a moment that I remember, because we went out to brunch and I had just met her, and she's like, dude, I just found this school. It's amazing. She doesn't say dude, but she's like, I'll correct that. She's never said dude in her life. She's like, I just found this really great school. It's amazing. And she was telling me all about it, just like super excited. Obviously the Safe House. And I was like, that sounds amazing. And I'm like, do they sponsor visas? And she's like, no. And I'm like, oh, heartbreak. And then I just, that we all went our separate ways.
Yeah.
And then, when she came back from London, she reached out to Stefan, and then we kind of reconnected. And then through her, we met Jeremy and Zach, whom all people you've had on the podcast, and we've kind of become friends, and it's been wonderful.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been really fun.
Yeah.
I'm very, very lucky to have them as friends.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
good people.
Really good people.
That's cool. I know, so we can talk about the pieces that we
let's
have
do it.
here. So
Sounds
one
good.
of them is Bethesda.
Yes.
So I figured this was a smooth transition.
Yeah, look at you.
So I know that one has to do with like a ghost, right? Or something?
Yes.
Is that what it's called?
It's called Spectre, which, means ghost.
Okay.
Yeah,
Maybe I
technically.
looked that up and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
it means ghost.
It
That's
does.
cool.
It does.
And this kind of, because I mean, looking through your work, it's like there's dark themes. And then when I saw this piece, and I thought that, and I looked up Spectre because I'm not a word person. I was like, oh, it means ghost. And that's one of those things where the title just, it has a feel kind of a ghost,
Yeah.
but then it's almost like it solidifies that the meaning of the painting in a way where you don't have any questions after that. Like you're not necessarily spoon feeding someone, but you're giving them enough tools to like to get there. And I don't know. I really like the piece just because it looks like a bride, So there's some like, you can wander. I don't know how much of it you play out in your head, but in my head, you can wander to the narrative that might build based off of how she's dressed.
Right. I mean, I definitely have an intention with my paintings, but I know that we all are gonna assume certain things depending on our culture, depending on our mood, depending on the place where you see the painting, and you're never gonna see a piece without bringing yourself into it.
Right.
So I'm aware of that. But for me, the piece kind of came to be because I was walking my dog with my husband in the Piedmont Cemetery, and I really like that cemetery. It's a really beautiful place. And one day we found this crypt that I really liked, and I was like, "Oh my God, I love this place! I have to do a shoot here. It's really cool." And we kept walking and talking with, and at some point I kind of imagined this kind of like Sleeping Beauty situation where a woman is interred and veil on top, kind of very old school, kind of not quite fairy tale-ish, but that kind of a thing. And I imagined, well, what if there is no Prince Charming and she just comes back up of her own volition, and this is what this kind of was, and that's why she has the veil. And initially I was doing this painting in color, full color, and I was like painting it, and I'm like, oh my God, this looks, it just doesn't carry the intent that I had at all. And I was like, oh. So I started messing about with the photo reference on Photoshop. I was like, what happens if I, make it monochrome? And I was like, oh, that's it.
Yeah.
And that conveyed the intent, right? But I directly started painting on top of that painting in like black and white and got rid of the color because it looked very kind of happy and bridal. And what I wanted was something kind of more mysterious and ethereal and ghost-like.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's kind of my take on a Sleeping Beauty without no Prince Charming.
Yeah. Do you
awesome.
believe in ghosts?
Not really. No, I mean,
neither.
no, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't. I think we are hardwired to imagine things very often and see things out of the corner of our eyes. And I am very much one of those people that's like, oh my God, what was that? But I don't really believe in them.
Yeah, I think your mind can play tricks on you sometimes too.
I think the real ghosts are your emotions. Like you might experience something traumatic and it stays with you.
Yeah.
And there is no actual ghost haunting you.
Right.
But it's the emotional trauma that you're dragging around with you, just kind of like haunting you, literally. So in that sense, I do believe in ghosts, but not as a spectral form that kind of floats around.
Not as an actual entity.
I know there's this, I forget what band it is, but they have a song about ghosts, but it's literally about like a girl who like hurt this person, but he said the line is like, whose house are you haunting now? Because he's kind of like over, like he's finally like not being haunted by the memory of her, and he's just like curious as to whose house is, like who's the guy that,
because there's someone.
And I always thought that was like an interesting take on
a ghost,
like a ghost narrative of like, it's just something you might regret or something that is constantly just like haunting you.
The things that you can't change.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
That's awesome. And then so this one, I don't remember the title, but I know it has to do with like dreams. I remember that.
This one is called Entre Sueños, which translates to In Between Dreams. And so when I did this piece, I was very much thinking about dreaming and how in the past like year and a half I've been going to therapy, and we talk a lot about dreams and analyzing your dreams. And
do they do that in therapy a lot?
Well, not all therapists. Like my therapist is a Jungian, so like
the reason why
they're very interested in dream, but it's not like there's like a standard book where if you dream of a duck, it means that X, Y, and Z. It's very tailored to what's going on in your life and what you're experiencing. And the whole shtick is that that your unconscious is aware of all of these things that your conscious mind isn't. And a lot of the times these things come up in dreams, and there's certain images that pop up, and it's your subconscious mind trying to say, hey dude, look out for this. And it's often much more exaggerated and kind of like more colorful in a way. And I've learned a lot about myself and the things that I'm dealing with through analyzing these dreams, and through kind of like really, like if I have a nightmare, of which I have many, I wake up in the middle of the night, type it into my phone, and then just pass out. And then, I'll go to therapy and I'm like, hey, this is what I dreamt. And it's on top of everything we're talking about in my whole life history. And then my shrink helps me bring out this context of what's actually going on. So this painting was really about honoring the process of dreaming and kind of listening to the dreams. So that was awesome. Kind of that was the focus of it. And yeah.
I've recently, and this is super interesting because I don't know if you've heard of sleep paralysis.
Yes.
For some reason, it reminds me of this. And I didn't realize what it was till somebody else pointed it out. And I knew it experienced a couple times. But then once somebody pointed it out, I've experienced it several times.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah. And it's such a and terrifying. Yeah. It's so this kind of reminds me of it, where it's like, it's her sleeping and then somebody moving on top, or herself moving again. But it's like she's trying to wake her up. So it to me, because again, like you said, it depends on who the person is, but this is like sleep paralysis, where it's like, wake up. But I
haven't quite experienced sleep paralysis, but I have vivid nightmares that sometimes I want to wake up from, and I'm like oftentimes I'm trying to scream in the dream, but I'm asleep, so I can't really scream. So I'm like really upset and just trying to scream, and all that comes out is and usually my husband's like, dude, are you all right? And I'm like, oh god, typing furiously into my phone, like, oh my god, someone's gonna have a field day with this tomorrow. Oh god. But no, in this, like the way I was envisioning it, it's more like the figure on the right is her subconscious mind, and she's gonna drop some truths into her ear, and hopefully the one on the left will listen. You never know. But it's been I really liked using Steph as a model for this, because her tattoos tell the story that it's the same person, right? Because a lot of the times, unless this is what I've noticed, that for instance, if you're painting a painting of a person and the person is in the image twice, oftentimes they'll be at a different angle, right? And unless you know a person, we look different in different angles, right? So some people immediately will look at a painting and be like, wait, is that the same woman in the painting? Is that her sister? Is that her brother? Like, what's going on?
Right.
So I was like, oh, it's really useful that Steph has tattoos on her left arm that can convey that is, I mean, it's exactly the same girl, you know? I mean,
that's a good point.
And that was like, I shot the photos, and I didn't do it thinking of it, but when I was looking through the photos and composing them on Photoshop, I was like, oh, it's really important to have that, because not everyone is going to be like, oh, that is the same girl, right? She's wearing the same blue top or whatever.
I've noticed the opposite before. I've painted someone in a thing twice and been like, no one's going to know that's the same person,
right? I mean, is that not an issue?
So it's a good those are like little details that can kind of help.
It's
like
a clue.
Yeah, because we're working on a mural right now, and we're getting a lot of feedback, and a lot of it is very personal, and a lot of it is very off from what we're trying to say, and you're realizing how maybe not necessarily spoon feeding someone, but like there's details like this that you can put into something that can help everyone figure things out,
right?
That won't necessarily feel like you're kind of dumbing down your work, but just helping people get what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's challenging, right? Because I mean, for me in the past, my work wasn't very narrative. It was just like I wanted to have this one image that was painted in a way that was demanded attention, right? Like a certain degree of realism that was like, okay, stop and look at this. This is the only object here. It's I spent a lot of time in it. What does it bring up in you? And that was kind of my intention. This one's a little bit more narrative. And I did struggle with thinking like, okay, how much clues do I want to put in there? How much am I going to use the paint as an indicator, right? Because the left-hand side of the piece is very tight and it's very rendered. And as it moves onto the shadow side, it becomes kind of fuzzier and fuzzier. And it's a lot looser than I would normally paint, right? And I thought of using that as a clue. And whether people get it or not, like consciously, it's there subconsciously. So, I mean, I think it's, Yeah,
I think you nailed it.
Why, thank you.
They're awesome pieces.
Thank you.
I like your work a lot.
Very cool.
Your work is, I mean, I feel like this exists always, where like work seen on Instagram or something is one thing, and then seeing it in real life is another thing. And I mean, I was going to say that seeing your work in person is always like, it's always just like way better than Instagram.
Yeah.
And I think that happens sometimes. It's weird when
it's the opposite. And that happens a lot too.
Yeah.
It's a letdown and you're like, oh man, that was cooler.
Right. That's always weird when it goes the other way. There's things that
photograph really well, like things that have high value contrast and really defined shapes. But then when you get to see it in person, you're like, those are some like weird edges.
Right.
Man.
It just looks sloppy or something. It looks really,
and that, I mean, I like painting things with a lot of detail. I enjoy realism. And I can understand how you can paint loose, but there's loose and then there's sloppy.
Right.
And sloppy just, it bothers me. Well, I have a hard time. Like if some there's an edge that just doesn't look considered. Yeah. That's like, gotta, even if you're going to fuzz it somehow and like do something to it to manipulate it to kind of recede.
Right.
But yeah, that happens a lot, you know, like you see people's art on Instagram and you're like, man, this is amazing. It's got to be really imposing. And the other thing that's a warp is the scale, right? Because everything, like that's one of the things it's one of the reasons why I am not super fond of Instagram, because I feel like the work that I make oftentimes doesn't read as well as I'd like it to. A lot of the times it's because of the format, because very rarely do I work in a square format. Right. Yeah. Sometimes I do, but very rarely. Right. And it doesn't matter if you're painting something that's 30 by 40 or something that's 5 by 5. Right. It's all going to look the same. And the whole scale thing is really kind of upsetting to me, because I don't like posting a lot of progress stuff. Right. I like posting maybe one of the early stages that looks good, and then I'll go through a really long period of ugly duckling stage. Right. Yeah. And then I want to post just the finished product. Right. And I'm like, I spent hundreds of hours on this, and you're just going to scroll right through it. And that's fine. You're a busy person. I get it. But I'm not doing myself justice in doing that. So that's one of the reasons why I haven't figured that out. And I think you guys do that really well, because you post the videos, you post like your different sketches during the day, and that's really successful. You don't burn yourself out to think like, oh fuck, I spent hundreds of hours on this thing, and then I've noticed that I'll post a sketch of something that's really crude, and people respond to it much better than a finished piece that took hours, and I'm like, oh god, it's such a letdown. So I constantly have that kind of fight with it.
I always wondered too, like one of the things I think about when posting like videos of me painting, is like my hand is in it, so you can understand scale. Even though I have giant hands,
really
so it might not work. But I've seen it with people that paint really big, where they're like in the shot, and it doesn't work the way scale works in real life, where you feel it more.
Right.
But it does
It helps.
kind of let your mind understand the scale of things. I mean, we're having back to the mural we're doing. When I look at the pictures, I'm like, this looks tiny.
Yeah, and then
when I'm at the wall, I'm like, this is humongous.
Yeah.
So it's a weird scale is such a weird thing, especially nowadays, because of most people taking art in through Instagram and the other whatever they're taking it in.
Yeah, I think I'd like to motivate people to go out to the galleries and just check it out, because I mean, even if you're not going to buy anything, we're freaking thrilled to have you. We're giving you booze. Come on over.
Yeah.
Because it's just such a different experience. And, you know, we spend a lot of time alone in our studios getting weirder and weirder. You know, it's good to get out and talk to other people.
How was the, like, because you just curated a show.
I did.
Muse. Which with like a ton of amazing artwork and amazing artists.
Thank you.
How was that as like part of a thing you're, I'm assuming, interested in pursuing more?
Yeah, I'd love to do it more. I mean, I was very, very lucky. When I got the job at Show Gallery, Julie McCrae, the gallery owner, who's the nicest person in the whole wide world.
Guinness, contact her.
Yeah, no, she's amazing. We met for the interview and we kind of hit it off right away. And like we talked for like half an hour. She's like, cool, I'll see you Wednesday. And I'm like, okay. And when amongst the things we talked about is I asked her, I'm like, oh, I looked through the gallery website and I was wondering, do you ever do group shows? And she's like, I do sometimes, but they're kind of a hassle. And she just like off the cuff says, want to curate one? And I'm like, what? Yes. And she's awesome. Like, cool, let's do it. And she's like, how's June? And I'm like, great. And like internally I'm like hyperventilating. Right. I'm prone to internally hyperventilating. So after that I was like super excited because I just gotten a job and I was going to curate a show. And it's cool because she put like a ton of trust in me from the beginning. And I'm also incredibly fortunate to have a really cool group of friends that are all super talented artists, and that, you know, they were awesome enough to be supportive and be like, okay, well, we've never heard of Show Gallery, but you're doing this and we want to support you. So here's 2 paintings or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. Nadia, there's a lot more, which is just, I was, just really grateful that everyone was so generous with their time and just, it was really, really kind of badass.
It's been a good show because Sergio went to it and he had a show that night that he didn't go to.
He did. I didn't know about that. I'm truly honored to hear that.
Yeah. So I mean, I know we didn't go, but because I think it fell on a weekday, and we're always like old people. We're like, it's an hour away, and we work at 5 a.m.
There was something else going on because it was on a weekend.
I think you were away. Yeah, I think you were camping or something.
There was something. I can't remember.
I can't remember what.
Yeah, there was
something. I really wanted
town.
to go to that show.
Yeah.
I know. Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It was a good show.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I know. It looked awesome.
Yeah.
I was super excited to go to that too.
I know.
Sorry. Apologies.
Next time.
I'm blaming MJ. Good thing she's not here to defend herself.
No, I hope that it won't be the last.
Yeah,
for sure.
So yeah, I hope that it won't be the last.
So how was that process?
It was, so the good thing is I knew most of the artists quite well. There were others that I didn't know as well personally, but I knew their credentials as artists. And I knew that they would deliver. I also, and I know who is kind of, out of that group of people, I knew who will over-deliver and deliver, you know, before you need it, and that. And there's other people that are, you know, also working full-time, so you understand that you have to be more flexible with them.
Right.
So I had a good balance of those two things. And I wasn't terrified because of that. But there is a moment where, you know, you've been reaching out and you're like, okay, I have no idea what you're going to come up with. And it's terrifying because it's a huge responsibility that, especially if you've ever worked in a gallery, you know that when you're showing an artist that has a lot of pull, people are going to come in and look at stuff. And our gallery is not in like the middle of a place where you can just accidentally walk into. No, you have to be very deliberate about going to Show Gallery. So it's a big responsibility to place artists that have a draw so that they will attract people to come into the gallery.
Right.
And the show's up for 3 weeks. And if nobody comes in for 3 weeks, we've had shows that are less well attended. and it's just like crickets for days, for 6 hours. So that I know what that's like, you know.
Right.
So I was really lucky to be able to know all these wonderful people and have them be generous with their time and their work. And it was really successful because the opening was a blast. There was
awesome.
so many people. It was like hot. It was loud. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And then we threw an after party for it at a winery nearby, and it was super fun. It was just really, really a great night. And
That's awesome.
Yeah, we just threw a party for everyone because we wanted to make them feel loved and appreciated.
For sure.
So yeah, it was a good night.
Yeah,
it was
cool.
a good night. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've never curated a show, but this podcast I have to deal with artists.
You're curating it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you realize that a lot of people that seem to be successful seem to have a decent work ethic and seem to be punctual. And sometimes there's artists that aren't so punctual, and their skill level might be at a high level, but they're a person that you always wonder why they might not be so successful, and you have to like deal with them, and you're like, oh, I kind of see what the flaw might be. It might just be that. I mean, even in a weird way, like MJ, she's super good at like emailing people back and forth nonstop. I'm so not that person. So for me, I'm like, I always have to like force myself to do it right away, or else I forget about it and then like on to the next thing. So it's interesting kind of seeing that dynamic of like artist and what are the things outside of the person that might cause them to not
sabotage?
be successful.
The self-sabotage.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a disconnect between the things that you want to do and if you're following up in order to get those things. And a lot of the times that can be a lack of confidence that kind of makes you not do those things or just kind of, I don't know. I think it's always like an internal thing, you know, like, oh, I'm a little self-conscious about this, so I'm not going to reach out. I'm a little too introverted to kind of like be, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that's a struggle that a lot of people have, myself included. So I grew up in a family where people tend to say the things that they want to do and they never go about doing them. And it's been really traumatic to grow up with people like, oh yeah, we're going to go there and we're going to do this and you're going to get this and you're going to get that. And it never materializes, like never. So it's like you're being... Yeah, it's very confusing to grow up in that because it's all talk. It's just hot air.
Right.
So for me, I was the same way, and I have that tendency because these were the people that raised me. So I try to make a point of doing what I say, and if I'm not going to do it, don't talk about it. Yeah. Because you betray yourself, and you will never become yourself if you're always promoting this kind of like self-sabotage. So that's kind of a thing that's one of my pet peeves. I try not to talk about something if I'm not going to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Or be very aware if I've said it, okay, now you're going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the toughest things with us is when we say we're going to do something, sometimes it's like, oh, we promised that we're going to do this. Like, there's no way I can't not do this.
Yeah.
And even if it's like a struggle and
it's like a huge task, but we're there.
Yeah. Well, but how good does it feel when you do it and you're like, you know what, that was monumental, but we got through this.
Right.
Or when the piece sells and you're like, wasn't even going to do that. It worked out good.
Nice.
Now I'm super stoked.
That's the best part.
It's just a fine line of making sure you don't overcommit to things either.
Yeah.
That's always like, it's a fine line of learning to say yes and no. Because if you say yes too much, then then you're half-assing your work or... You know, so it's a fine line of catering to what you say yes to and no to and making sure that it's...
Definitely. Yeah, and then make sure that when you say yes, you produce the best thing that you can possibly do.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I think, too, another thing is you have to be like... You have to have, like, a good... Like, you have to communicate well with galleries if you are stressing about something. Because I've had it where we've had shows planned and it might be, like... 3 people, like a 3-person show, and you're like, I don't know if I can deliver to fill these walls. And they go like, all right, well, we'll pull one more person in. And then it's not that big of a deal.
Not at all.
And it's like, all right, cool, we nailed it. Now the show looks good. The walls are filled and we're all happy. But if you kind of under-deliver because you're afraid to communicate.
Right.
That's really problematic. I've seen that happen in the gallery. Like every now and again, it's like somebody's spread thin. and they're like, okay, I'm going to drop off paintings. And show gallery isn't huge, but it's not a box. There's a lot of walls that turn. So even if it's
a lot of surface space,
it's a lot of surface space. And then like we're like hanging the show, and I'm like, that's it. And it's like, okay. The artist comes back, and they're like, holy crap, what else do you got? Go get something from the studio, because these walls aren't staying naked.
Yeah.
So there's always like that adjustment. So I think one of the things that I've learned in having this experience of working in a gallery, whenever you're going to do a show in a gallery, if you can possibly go there physically and get a rough idea of the amount of wall space that you have, and kind of what is the style in which the curator or gallerist hangs the space, because some people hang it salon style and it's very crowded when you have like group show with like 100 people. Yeah, that makes sense. But if you're doing like a 1-2 person show where it's a sparser hang, you really got to pay attention to kind of the format of the pieces that you're going to hang and kind of how they're going to play together. And that's just not something that, you know, if you're just painting in your studio, that you really kind of realize, because you don't even have this, a lot of times you don't have the space to like hang it on the walls and experience it as a show. And that's just something that's really kind of important to think about. Because sometimes if you get a show in the gallery, and now like a lot of the times it's me and Julie, and we're like, okay, how are we going to hang this? And there are some paintings that just don't play well together side by side. Some artists come up with like a really cohesive thing that they just flow, and it's, you know, you just put them on the walls in like 20 minutes and you're like, sold, that's done. And other times you're like, fuck, it's like arranging this bizarre puzzle that has pieces missing. And it's a very interesting experience to have. I would recommend for a lot of like emerging artists, if you ever have the opportunity to work in a gallery, do it, because it's like, it's really looking behind the curtain. And I remember having the experience of being an emerging artist, doing my emails like they taught me at the Academy of Art, and reaching out to galleries and getting nothing, and just sitting there like a sad sack being, oh, why doesn't anybody take a chance on an emerging artist? This is such a bummer. You work in a gallery and you learn that in like 5 minutes. You know, and you learn that you're the one that needs to kind of adapt and find a gallery that actually suits what you're working, what you're making. I would never say make what the gallery wants you to make. I would say find a home for your stuff. And there's thousands of galleries. You just have to do the research and look at them.
For sure. That's super good advice. I mean, I've never worked in a gallery, but I could kind of see how watching how the sausage is made could really, like, even I think sometimes people have this like almost like magical idea of some galleries, like they're like the end all be all, they're gonna solve all my issues, and I think it's a false idea, because at the end of the day the art speaks for itself. The gallery's just curating who they think are best, and I think once you realize, just kind of realizing that in general, that the art is where like what you should pursue is, that's at least for me, in my thoughts, is to try to make the best painting possible. You know, the best for you, like in your opinion. And
definitely. Well, because it's gonna show. You're gonna enjoy it more. Like I'm very. It's a funny thing when I started painting these like death paintings and skulls. It's like, I get that this is not for everyone. Like no, but like there are very few humans that are gonna want a huge painting of a beautiful guy that looks dead. I mean, it's like a handful of people. I know this. But I kept going because it made me happy. And the funny part is, while I haven't sold that piece, I haven't found that magical unicorn of a human. In the only solo show that I've done, I had a whole bunch of skull pieces, and I've had people like not friends, but like family members, but say like, geez, stop it with the skulls already. I sold all of the skulls. Like that's thing awesome. That they were like, okay, you really need to stop this. People respond well to those, and it's just because I love them, and it shows. And you got to be a little weird. Especially in this culture, because there's not a lot of value in thinking about dying. People don't like doing that. I think if you think about the possibility of dying every day, you're going to live a better life. That's just standard in my mind. But it was funny that this thing that, you know, I thought people weren't going to respond to, people responded positively to. So, you know, do what is you. Do what you makes you happy, what you're interested in, what makes you, because everybody's trying to be or trying to emulate like a gimmick that they saw on Instagram.
What's trendy?
Yeah, because that's real hot right now.
Right.
Screw that. Do what makes you.
Exactly.
Because you're the only one that can tell that story.
Right. And you'll hate your work if you're doing something that you don't enjoy.
Yeah.
You know? And what's the point of that?
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, some people work really fast, so if they're doing stuff that they're half-hearted about, they can just like do it in an afternoon. Unfortunately, my work still takes a long time, so I really think about like, I'm going to live with this thing for hours and hours and hours. I better be thrilled about it.
Right.
Like for me, it's like I'll take a photo reference, and if I'm looking at it in camera and it strikes me, I'm like, that's the one, and I know it. If I'm looking through like a bunch of photo like stuff that I shot for, and I'm not excited about it, I know it's not gonna work out.
Right.
Even before I do a sketch, before I do anything, I'm like, if it doesn't grasp me at that point, I know back to the drawing board.
Yeah. Usually, I can tell the second I shoot it. I'm like, that's a painting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always a great feel. That's when
it's the best.
I get so excited when I realize I'm like, you just made it so easy.
Yeah, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I like about working with friends, because there's always an awkwardness in directing someone on how to pose, for something that you want.
Right.
And that's challenging because if you're not doing it a lot, it's like, okay, like,
right.
I don't know, there's an awkwardness to it.
I get this fully. I thought you were doing an impression of me right there.
Yeah, sorry. No, I'm doing an impression of me. I think it's common ground.
Universal.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think everybody has their strategies to get around that, but a really good one is to, work with friends, because it's going to be less awkward.
What I do is I watch when I follow photographers, and when they go live, I'm like watching and just listening. I'm like, oh, that's what they say. Oh, that makes so much sense.
I need to do that. That's such a great tip. Tell me more.
That's all I got. That's my only director photography thing I have, is like whenever I see a live or like any video where they're like shooting someone, I'm always like, what are they saying to them? That's what I want to listen to.
Yeah, I mean, that's everything, right?
Yeah, because
not everyone is theatrically inclined.
Right. And they also put in the work to like figure out what works and doesn't. So they'll say stuff, I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is just being, if you ever see like National Geographic people shoot, they're shooting like billions of images, right? So out of billions of images, they'll get a handful at best, and kind of having that humility of saying like, well, this is gonna take a while.
Yeah.
No.
But they also have Nat Geo funding.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing.
Gosh, how do I get that?
That's a different story.
Another tip I have, I don't know if it's useful at all, but I realized when I explain the concept to the model, it helps a lot. Like if I'm going for this idea where this person's supposed to feel this.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're like making them pose and they're trying to pose pretty. Yeah. And you're like, this is supposed to be a darker, like sadder narrative. So I kind of need you in that place.
I mean, it's a collaboration, no? I mean, that's the cool thing, and somehow when you work with a friend or someone that you know and kind of is familiar with your work, that just comes off a lot more naturally.
Right, that makes sense.
And it's just like, it's funny, whenever I've worked with Steph, who's also my studio mate, like we do a photo shoot and it literally takes like half an hour. That's awesome. Like in half an hour I know I have it because she knows my work, we're like-minded, and it's just boom, done.
Well, she's a photographer. Maybe next time you should just eavesdrop on her.
Yeah. Well, no, I've also posed for her. Yeah. Just once. Yeah. But I'm sure it'll happen again.
Yeah. Right.
Proximity, Yeah.
You just got to take down everything she says and be like, cool, I'll say that to the person.
Definitely.
Yeah, hell yeah.
It's cool.
So we have... sorry, I had to burp a little bit.
It's all good. You were drinking sparkling water. It happens.
we have a section at the end of our show.
The section.
Where we have a couple sections. So
go for it.
So we have top artist living, top 5 alive.
Okay. I don't know if I'll do 5.
Okay.
But one of my favorite artists is Gerhard Richter. I really like his earlier works because he does like realism-y stuff, but then he currently does a lot of abstract work, and I'm obviously more oriented to the realism thing, but I like the mood of his paintings because he's really embracing some like dark stuff. I mean, he lived through World War II, so yeah.
Which one is Gerhard Richter?
I don't know.
I'm so bad at names.
So I don't have his book here. Hang on.
I'll just Google it on my phone.
Just do the Google.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's one of my favorites, and I found Justin Mortimer at a very complicated time in my life that I already mentioned. And Justin Mortimer, at the time where I found his work, he was doing a lot of scenes of like hospitals, and they're kind of like hospitals, but there's like contrasting with like balloons and something that's really festive, but the lighting is kind of like very sickly and weird, and it feels like a dream or a nightmare. And because I had this whole experience of being in the hospital with my mother, I saw some really bizarre things, and like some people that were really, really ill, and they no longer looked like
human.
They didn't know. They looked like they were made out of wax.
Yeah.
They were just ashen, and it was just really disturbing, because if you ever sat in an ICU, odds are like you see clusters of families, and like one day you see a group of them and they just fall to pieces, and you know what's happened. You don't have to be a genius to figure it out, and you're just sitting there and you're like, you know, it's like you've taken a number at the DMV. You know?
You guys are kind of friends in a weird. That's the other thing with
really
ICU.
weird.
You guys like get to know each other.
Yeah, it's really
you might
weird.
play cards with each other, whatever.
Yeah,
it's a weird environment for sure.
Definitely. So there's like this weird, bizarre kinship in waiting to see what's going to happen, and very, you know, if you sat in an ICU, very few times do you see people get up happy because their person has been moved, you know, to another wing of the hospital. Most of the time, you know, just see human misery and like people walk out. So I found his work at that point where I'd just been through this very traumatic ordeal of spending weeks and weeks in a hospital and seeing hospital gowns, and like my mom was in the ICU, so you had to like put on gowns, you had to put on gloves. I couldn't touch my mother because she had influenza, and this is what was killing her. So we had to be vaccinated. You had to like sanitize your hands, and not to be able to touch your mother after you haven't seen her in a year was really traumatic. And just the experience of like smelling the sanitizers and the gloves and the masks and the gowns, and then I found his work, and just to me it was that
experience
in this very like dystopic kind of horrific experience. So a lot of people don't like looking at that, but for me it brings me to a moment that I know very, very well. So yeah, it made a big impression on me. I don't paint like that. I try to paint like myself, but there's something of that mood that I am inspired by and kind of motivated by.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so living.
That's your two?
Yeah, I'll do two.
Hell yeah, why not? So this is a question I asked, but is there any artist that you hate?
Hate.
Or strongly dislike, I should probably
strongly
change.
dislike Renoir.
Okay.
Because everything looks like it's made out of cotton candy, and it's just not tangible, and everything's like squishy, and it just makes it's a visceral thing.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure a lot of people can defend, oh, Renoir this, Renoir that. Physically, I look at it and it just makes me cringe. So sorry. I think the problem with art is that a lot of people, they want to like what is smart to like, what is gonna. If you say, oh, these are the artists that I like. Right. Then I will be approved by people. No, these are the artists to respect.
Hipster mentality.
Yeah, these are the artists that you can like, and these are the artists that no matter how much you dislike them, you can't say you dislike. Right. So for me, Renoir is definitely that. It just, I'm not into it. Aesthetically, I hate the colors. I hate the textures. It just makes me want to run away screaming.
Right. It's just kind of boring too.
Yeah, more than boring. Like I don't mind boring. It's just. Everything looks the same. If it's a mug or it's a woman, it's made of the same substance. And I'm like, I'm not a mug. So there's that.
We got an answer.
Yeah.
We usually get a dodge on that one.
Really?
Yeah.
That's because people are self-conscious, man.
Yeah. But I also say hate, and I think if I say strongly dislike, I might get more answers.
Yeah, because nobody wants to be a hater.
Yeah.
I mean, especially not in this climate. You know, like being a hater has gotten real negative lately.
Yeah. And then, God, Sergio does this thing where he does quick fire of lists, but I don't remember all the artists, but we can try.
What about are you guys still doing the David Choe mini question?
Yeah. Okay, we'll do...
Sorry.
Go for it.
We'll do the quick fire, then David Choe. Okay. So the quick fire, I know he puts Rembrandt in there.
Love
Rembrandt.
Love.
I know he puts...
Strong love.
He puts Sargent.
Yeah, I mean, how can you not?
Right. But he also, so then another one he puts is Shepard Fairey. That's another artist.
Very successful in communicating. I mean, yeah.
And then, God, don't know, I don't know if he puts Basquiat in there.
Think so, but whatever.
I can't speak on Basquiat with authority. Like, I've seen his stuff online and on TV. I haven't experienced it in person.
Right.
And if I haven't experienced it in person, I'd rather not say.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's something like where the colors are super flat, like a Rothko, and I haven't seen it in person, I'm more comfortable talking about it. But I've had the good fortune of sitting in front of a Rothko, and while initially it wouldn't be something that I'd be like, yeah, I'm stoked about this, being at MoMA and sitting in front of it and just, I don't know, I like it, even though it's so different from what I do, and I don't tend towards abstraction. Like this, I take Rothko any day over Renoir, like any day. Right. And it's just it doesn't really match up with the work that I do, but something about his work just kind of speaks to me.
A lot of people feel that way.
Yeah.
I think he also is a champion of scale.
Yeah, I mean, scale is so important.
Yeah.
It's just such a striking, like, have you seen them in person, the Rothkos?
Yeah, I think so.
They're just massive.
Yeah, and usually they'll have a little bench in front of them. Yeah. So if you're lucky and there's not a lot of people, you can just plop yourself down and be like,
Do you remember any of the names Sergio puts out? I know he puts out, what's Mick Dripper's name?
Pollock.
Oh,
yeah. Well, Pollock, the thing with Pollock is that he's the first one doing this. He was like thinking outside the box, and he innovated in a way. Would I buy a Pollock? Of course I can't afford it, but would I if I could? No. Yeah. Not really.
Yeah.
I'd probably buy a living artist over a dead one, because the dead ones don't care. I'd rather support artists that are living so that they can keep making more art.
Yeah.
So,
well put. And I know he does Happy Tree Guy.
Oh, Bob Ross. Well, Bob Ross was great. We all loved him on PBS.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like,
I can't remember anyone else, but
I love watching
I feel like that was good.
Yeah,
Bob Ross is like calligraphy.
Does he put Banksy in there? No, huh?
Banksy? No. Yeah. I don't think.
Thoughts on Banksy?
Fun. Interesting.
Yeah.
Just very far from my wheelhouse. Like, it's not something that I look at and I find interesting, and I enjoy it. But I can't. It's not something I can speak on with authority on.
Yeah, I think he's his Van Gogh too. I might be wrong on that. Yeah. You got any opinions on that guy?
Oh man, we lose the best ones to mental illness, don't we? The best ones.
You hear of his symptoms, and he's told he was bipolar or something.
Yeah,
like he was.
Poor thing. Yeah. I mean, imagine that suffering with no medications. And it's funny. I started listening to an audiobook of his letters to his brother while I was painting. Oh my God, it's so like. I want to read the book, but it's so depressing because this poor man is he's just suffering. And at the same time, he's like marveling in nature, and it's just heartbreaking. Yeah. There's something about having a voice in your ear that it just made it too overwhelming. I was like, my heart breaks for this poor man that died many, many years ago. And he was like, just so amazing and so misunderstood.
Right. Sure. But then his paintings are just it's just a product of his mental illness.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, we all are, aren't we?
Frida, which...
that Frida. Too. She definitely had some sort of depression.
I mean, that's one of the names Sergio says.
Oh.
Well, as a Mexican person, obviously I know about her work and her biography from a very early age. And while aesthetically it's not something that I'm drawn to, there are parts of it that I really like, which is that she was painting her reality. She's often confused for a surrealist, but she's very autobiographical in her works, if you know a little bit about her. And there are certain things that I like about that, because you don't know, in some ways, the things... I like the idea of painting what you know about. And you know that what you know about more is your own experience. And in a way, that's... Whether you like her aesthetically or not, I think that's what makes her great, because she was very honest about who she was.
Right.
And I think that she spoke from a place that was personal. And to me, I think art has to be honest and simple. I don't think that you are going to be you're not going to connect with a lot of people if you're trying to just be very lofty about what you're doing. Right. You're going to connect with more people if you're honest and transparent. And I think that's what she was doing. And you can say whatever the hell you want about her aesthetics, but there's a vulnerability and a transparency in her work and an honesty, a brutal honesty at that, that it's hard not to respond to, I think. And in a way, she's also telling a story with her work, a very personal one, but I like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, and last question in our quick fire extravaganza. Sorry, I have no. If you had David Choe money, what would you do?
David Choe money.
So he's like, I think he's like $200 million is in his bank account, something like that.
Shit, I would hire the best immigration lawyers and I would fucking deploy them to the border to help out all of those people. That's the first thing I would do. And further than that, I think I would find ways to support the arts and emerging artists. But I think number one is very clear for me.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, before I had the studio, I probably would have said, I need to get myself a really, really good studio. But this is pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't need much more. So I think that's what I do.
Hell yeah. It'll work. Awesome. I think that's pretty much it. If anyone wants to find your work or you, you can find you at the gallery.
Yes, I work at Show Gallery in Berkeley. We're at 700 Gilman.
Yeah.
So come check us out.
And then on Instagrams, it's
Ximena Rendon.
And that's with the X.
Yes.
We'll shout it out on the social media so people can find you. And do you have a website? Or?
I do. It's my first and last name, ximenarendon.com.
Awesome. And then check out your husband's short film.
Yes, it's called Space Sharks, and you can find that on YouTube. Yay!
And do you have any shows coming up?
I do. I have a solo show at Show Gallery in the fall, next fall, so there's a while. And between now and then, there is a show, group show in November at Show Gallery. It's called A Box Full of Darkness. We're still going to send out invites for that. And I am going to be participating in a couple of group shows at Stone and Sparrow in New York.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I think we're going to show. Is that what we're showing?
Is that where we're showing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I found that gallery because of Hellis Wen, good friend of mine, and I was like, oh man, this gallery just kind of looks like what I do. So I reached out and it went well.
Yeah,
it's exciting when you do find a gallery that you're like, I'm a fit for this. Hopefully they're open to the idea.
That's exactly how I felt when I saw that gallery. I was like, oh, this would fit like a glove.
Yeah,
because there's some other galleries that I follow that are kind of have a dark bent, but they're darker than I go. Like it's kind of like even more gothic, even more dark. And I've submitted and I got no reply, and I'm like, it's because it doesn't quite fit. It's the similar vein, but not quite. And that one was just like, oh yeah, that looks right.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So it's cool to find that. It's exciting.
Yeah, that was one of the tips you said on the show that I thought was very important. Just looking for the gallery that fits you, because you can't kind of force your stuff into a place.
Yeah.
You also don't want to be underappreciated. Like if somebody shows your work and they're like meh about it, like they're not going to promote it, they're not going to show it. If it doesn't sell, they're just going to put it in the back. Because that's what I mean. Sorry, that's what galleries do, especially if they have a huge roster. I mean, just think about numbers. You know, if the gallery has 10,000 artists, well, it's very hard for them to make you a priority. So find somebody that really responds to your work, because they're out there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think, what was I just literally lost everything I was going to say.
That happens to me a lot.
But yeah, I think that's the whole, like, them being stoked on you. What I was going to say was that in this world where, like, you can build an Instagram following, you might not necessarily have a gallery that's into your work because they're stoked on you. Yeah. They might literally just want the crowd of people that you've summed up. So I think paying attention to what they're curating and what they're kind of the direction they're going and seeing if you fit in is also good for you, because it might not necessarily be, they might not necessarily want to work for you just because they like your work.
Right. Yeah, it's just because you have a fuck ton of followers and they want to get people through the doors, and that's natural. I mean, unfortunately, it's not possible to have a gallery and just give everybody a shot. It is unfortunately a business, and if you have if you work for, if a gallery is a good gallery, they spend time on you. Like, they promote your work, and they're thinking about you, and they're thinking about how to reach out to people that will love your work. And that's a good gallery. A good gallery is a gallery that is happy about handing you a check, not one that's dodging giving you a check. And like, I am so lucky that I work in a gallery that is like that. I mean, I've seen paintings go off the wall, and I turn around and Julie is already writing a check to the artist. Like, the painting is in the parking lot. She's already written a check. and that is it's formidable. Like,
Right.
That's not, you guys are artists. You know that's not how it works most of the time. So yeah, it's really fortunate to have that experience of seeing someone so committed to the artist.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hell yeah. This has been Waiting to Dry. If you're still listening, fuck off.
Thanks, guys.
You woke up right in time.
That was awesome. Oh, guys, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor. You guys have such